Today, I'm going to give you 8 players who are trending up and 2 players who are trending down in fantasy football ahead of week 14. These will help you make proper roster and lineup decisions as we close in on the fantasy football playoffs and on the road to a championship. Let's start with our guys who are trending up. Chuba Hubbard started the season behind off-season addition Miles Sanders. It wasn't long, though, before Chuba Hubbard proved to be the more explosive and efficient running back in Carolina. It's now been several weeks since he took a stranglehold on the RB1 job, but there were doubts about him retaining that top spot with last week's coaching changes. But he did just that. In week 13 against the Buccaneers, Chuba Hubbard carried the ball a season-high 25 times for 104 yards and a pair of scores. He was just the second running back to reach the 100-yard mark against the Buccaneers all season. And Hubbard has now scored 42.6 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks, and he's solidified his spot atop that depth chart. His utilization in the passing game will cushion his floor and enhance his ceiling as we head towards the fantasy football playoffs. And if you believe Chuba Hubbard continues to dominate the backfield work in week 14, then you can play this pick'em on Underdog Fantasy. Lock in your pick now or draft a whole starting lineup for week 14 and use promo code YARDSPER to get a $100 deposit match and a free mystery pick'em. Nico Collins is experiencing a third-year breakout. A lot of that can be attributed to the play of rookie quarterback CJ Stroud, but Collins has done his part in facilitating what has been so far a top 12 season. And Stroud will need to lean on Collins even more now with Tank Dell out for the season. And with Dell leaving early in week 13, Collins exploded for 191 yards and a touchdown while catching 9 of 12 targets. It was his second consecutive 100-yard performance and his 4th of the season. Nico Collins currently sits top 10 among wide receivers in receiving yards, yards after catch, yards per route, and yards per target, according to playerprofiler.com. And looking ahead to the fantasy football playoffs, the Texans do have a tough matchup against the Browns in week 16, but that is sandwiched between 2 games against the pass-funnel Titans in weeks 15 and 17. Nico Collins is going to be on a lot of championship rosters at season's end. After a hot start to the season, Panthers veteran wide receiver Adam Thielen has been unsurprisingly fading in the second half. And that has coincided with the ascension of rookie second-round pick Jonathan Mingo. Now, Mingo is not a strong prospect coming out of Ole Miss, and he may never truly break out, but we have to pay attention to his recent usage. The team is clearly trying to get him the football, and that continued under the new coaching regime in week 13. Jonathan Mingo led the Panthers with a 91.4% route participation rate against the Buccaneers, and he's had target shares of 20.6%, 23.1%, 25%, and 38.5% over the last 4 weeks. And like I said, he's unlikely to break out, but he needs to be monitored and stashed in deeper leagues. Zay Jones may wind up being a league winner. At least the junior version of a league winner, right? However, there are 2 major contingencies on that. One is the health of quarterback Trevor Lawrence. He needs to not miss more than a week or 2 for this to come to fruition. We would also need Christian Kirk to remain out with his groin injury. While it's too early to know how these 2 injuries will play out, if Trevor Lawrence is in and Christian Kirk is out, Zay Jones will be a major factor in the fantasy football playoffs. Jones has finally gotten healthy himself, and he's coming off an 8-target game. And as the wide receiver 2 in Jacksonville last season, Zay Jones commanded over 120 targets, and he averaged more than 12 fantasy points per game. With matchups against the Buccaneers and the Panthers in the final 2 weeks of the fantasy football playoffs, Zay Jones needs to be added in all leagues. Amari Cooper may miss time with his concussion, which could make Elijah Moore fantasy relevant. With Amari Cooper leaving early in week 13, Elijah Moore was targeted 12 times. Now, he only caught 4 of those for 83 yards, but he led all NFL pass catchers with 255 air yards, and he was the clear favorite of quarterback Joe Flacco. If Flacco remains the starter in week 14 and Amari Cooper sits, Elijah Moore is going to be a worthy wide receiver 3 option in a pivotal final week before the start of the fantasy playoffs. And he gets a great matchup against the Jaguars, who just got lit up by Jake Browning and company. Zack Moss' season was back on last week after it was reported that Jonathan Taylor would miss multiple weeks with a thumb injury. Unfortunately, for those who plugged Zack Moss into their starting lineup for week 13, he only produced an underwhelming 7.7 fantasy points. However, that came against a strong Titans run defense and in a game where Gardner Minshew dropped back nearly 50 times. But Moss's role was right in line with what we saw from him earlier in the season when he was operating as the team's RB1. Moss was on the field for 94% of the snaps, and he ran 32 routes, which was a 64% route participation rate, and he led the backfield in targets. The schedule opens up for the Colts moving forward with especially juicy matchups in Week 16 and Week 17 when they get the Falcons and the Raiders. Christian Watson appeared to re-injure his hamstring on Sunday Night Football. If he misses time, Packers rookie wide receiver Dontayvion Wicks is going to be asked to step up. And Wicks has flashed at times during the season. He had a 91-yard receiving game in Week 11, and he's gone over 40 yards 6 times. And fellow rookie Quentin Johnson has only done that twice in Los Angeles, despite being a first-round pick and playing a full-time role. But I digress. I had to get that dig in there. Over the next 4 weeks, the Packers get the Giants, Buccaneers, Panthers, and Vikings. If Christian Watson misses that stretch, Dontayvion Wicks could be a relevant flex play in deeper formats. Now, I do want to note that Jaden Reed is going to be the biggest beneficiary of Christian Watson's absence, but hopefully you already knew that. We talked about him last week, and we've talked about him on multiple other videos throughout the season. Jaxon Smith-Njigba was incredibly close to a huge breakout performance in Week 13. He ended the day with a modest 7 catches for 62 yards, but it could have been so much better. JSN was originally ruled to have scored a long touchdown, but it was actually called incomplete after replay review, despite the lack of clear evidence that Smith-Njigba actually lost control of the ball as he hit the ground. That would have been an additional 10 fantasy points on top of the 13.2 that he was officially credited with. But despite the disappointment, Jaxon Smith-Njigba's fantasy managers should be excited about that performance. That's because on a day where DK Metcalf was as hot as anyone, JSN still led the Seahawks with 11 targets and a 28.9% target share. It really should be no surprise that it's taken Jaxon Smith-Njigba a little bit of time to get going this year. After all, he pretty much didn't play football last season due to injury at Ohio State. And then he had wrist surgery like 2 weeks before the start of his rookie season. And then factor in target competition in the names of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, there was really little reason to panic. And now 13 weeks into the season and quarterback Geno Smith playing better, it would not be surprising to see Jaxon Smith-Njigba have a late season breakout. And that could happen just in time for the fantasy football playoffs when the Seahawks get matchups against the Eagles and the Titans, 2 of the worst teams at defending wide receivers this season, and then the Steelers, who are about middle of the pack in that same category. Before we get into the players who are trending down in Week 14, if you're enjoying this video and you find it at all valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm pumping out content like this all season long. And let me know your toughest Week 14 start-sit decision in the comments, and I'll let you know what I would do. It's time that we have a difficult conversation about Austin Ekeler. It's been no secret that Austin Ekeler has not looked like his explosive self this season. We've all seen the highlight of him looking sluggish as he was caught from behind while running down the sideline just a few weeks ago. Whether it's age or the after effects of his early season ankle injuries, something isn't right. Ekeler has not reached 70 rushing yards in a game since Week 1. He also hasn't hit 50 receiving yards since the end of October. In his last 3 games, Austin Ekeler has totaled just 161 yards, no touchdowns, and he's fumbled twice. He's averaging fewer than 8 fantasy points per game during that stretch. And his efficiency metrics have declined across the board, and the struggles of the Chargers offense hasn't helped. The schedule for the fantasy football playoffs, Raiders, Bills, Broncos, is about as juicy as it gets, but I'm a little worried that Austin Ekeler may not have enough gas left in the tank to fully take advantage. Sam Howell has been the quarterback streamer of the year in 2023, but his days as a reliable starting option in fantasy football may be over. Howell had been trending down already heading into Week 13, but his performance against the Dolphins really put the nail in his coffin. How in a game that you lose by 30 points do you only attempt 23 passes? The matchup with the Dolphins was the week to play Sam Howell, and he let us down big time. Now he has a fantasy playoff schedule against the Rams, Jets, and the 49ers. All have been difficult matchups for quarterbacks this season, especially the Jets and the 49ers. Howell cannot be trusted in these matchups. I really hope you have other options. Hey, if you like that video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment on what you want me to talk about next. You can find all my stuff, my rankings, articles, podcasts, more videos like this on yardsperfantasy.com. Just download the Yards Per Fantasy app, and we thank you for your support.